I just want to welcome everyone today. This is our August edition for the Scaling Montana Speakers Series. If you don't know who I am, I'm Spencer Buck, the Executive Director for the Montana Ambassadors. And I'll be your host today with this sort of joint session between Scaling Montana and the Ambassadors. For those who don't know who the Ambassadors are, we're a volunteer nonprofit and nonpartisan organization made up primarily of business leaders in the state, but also outside of the state of Montana. And our members basically act as official ambassadors for the state. We have 7 chapters in the state and 4 outside of state, including Seattle, Denver, and 2 in California. But excited to be here and get things rolling. As you all know, the speaker series is about connecting, Montana entrepreneurs and leaders with people and stories and insights that can inspire and guide us, as we grow this kind of world-class ecosystem of companies right here in the state. Today, we're happy to have a great success story, Kellen Carter, a founding partner at Fuse. Kellan is a Montana native, grew up in Great Falls, as you probably just heard, went to the University of Montana, and has become a leading voice in early stage venture capital. Fuse is based in Seattle. He's an investor in between $1 and $10 million companies, mostly in founders building intelligent applications in verticals and enterprise software markets. So before Fuse, he was also a partner at Ignition Partners, where he led investments in companies such as Certus and Simon. And Kellan is also a proud member of the Montana Ambassadors Seattle chapter. He has a deep passion for strengthening ties between our state and the broader innovation economy. Anyway, a couple things we'll talk about today is just sort of, some of the things he's, very much vested in terms of what he looks for in founders, his journey from Montana to the forefront of investing, mostly venture investing, and just lessons learned, et cetera, from some of the early stage companies he's worked with. So we'll have Q&A at the end. So I encourage you to drop any questions you have in the chat throughout the session. And I guess we'll just kick things off. Kellan, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic.
Good.
Never better than talking to people from Montana.
Good. Well, great. No, we're excited to have you. And needless to say, we'll kind of get things moving here. I guess, first and foremost, I'd love to just kind of get things opened up with, you grew up in Montana, went to the University of Montana. Can you just kind of walk us through your journey from Missoula to becoming a partner at Fuse?
I think it even starts before then in a town called Great Falls. And I was thinking about this before the call. It's really nice not to have to explain how close Great Falls is to where they filmed the show Yellowstone to this audience, which is rare. But I grew up in Great Falls, central Montana. My mom grew up on a 10,000 acre wheat and barley farm. So the roots of the family all started with wheat, winter wheat, and barley farming, and being around that growing up, which was fascinating. I made my way to Missoula, believe it or not, on a high jump scholarship of all random things. I performed worse in college than I did in high school, so that wasn't ideal. But I chose to go to Missoula based on the business school, based on the accounting program, and based on the opportunities I thought it could set myself up for post-graduation. Graduating in May of '09 with a finance degree was suboptimal, is probably the only word I can use to describe it. And I wanted to be an investment banker. And, all the headlines at the time were how many investment bankers were getting laid off by the JP Morgans, Lehman going out of business, Goldman, et cetera. So that was a little bit of a headwind in the early chapters of the career. And so I had to be creative at the end of the day. And I started to go through the Missoula alumni Rolodex and found people like Eric Sprunk, who was the then COO of Nike, and then this really important person in my life named John Connors, who was running a firm called Ignition at the time, one of the largest venture capital firms in Seattle. But prior to Ignition, he was the CFO of Microsoft. He was on the board of Nike, had a stellar career as both an operator and investor. And for some God-given reason, he agreed to take a meeting with me. And I remember reading 2 books on venture capital and the week leading up to it. It was all about founders and markets. My dad said, "You're not jumping on a phone call with a guy of this caliber and reputation. You're emptying your piggy bank and you're going to get on a flight and you're going to go to Seattle." And he was so generous with his time. He spent 90 minutes with me and explained to me, of course, like the books, that it's really all about the founders and the market opportunity when you're investing in early stage startup companies. I then began my career at a firm called KPMG in the LA area, auditing asset backed securities. And this is a really important moment in time because this was post the global financial collapse. And there was just essentially frozen markets and mortgages, both on the commercial and residential side of things, and things like auto leases, and even things like student loans. And so a lot of the big four were doing, with support from the government, were hiring lots of junior auditors to comb through the documents to recreate stability and confidence in the structured markets to unthaw the debt and the securitization markets. And so that really meant me, and that was a very glorified way to explain it, but it meant me getting a stack of loan docs every single day and flipping through to make sure the interest rate, the last name, the social security number, the credit score, the place of birth, et cetera, all matched the CSV file that was getting sent to the bankers. Well, I was around a lot of smart people at this time, and I had built a relationship with John. He started to spend a lot more time with me, which I would soak up any amount of time and wisdom I can get, and got a lot of encouragement and support to figure out a path into software. And it was really clear that technology was starting to change every single role with this thing in the shift called cloud computing and software as a service. And the only way to learn it is to move to the Bay Area at that time. Information wasn't as proliferated as it is today. Throw yourself in the Mecca, go figure out a role at a startup or tech company or doing finance for technology companies. And I landed at this investment bank called Moreland Partners, where they were a very active tech M&A firm, mostly selling European-based companies to big companies in the US. So all these big companies in the US could use their offshore cash versus pay the big tax rate to move it back to the US. So that meant for some very bizarre hours working on Swiss deals, Swedish semiconductor deals, components deals in Switzerland, and trying to sell them to companies on the West Coast. And you're doing management team meetings at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and then you're doing your pitch deck work from 10 p.m. till midnight. And so the sleeping arrangement was not ideal. But wow, was it an amazing forcing function to learn technology in a lot of different categories, learn what I liked about technology, and also, just as importantly, what I didn't like. And really quickly living in San Francisco from 2011 to 2013, you got to recall this is when Facebook was going public, Twitter had just gone public. I remember that experience where I first used Uber. I think it was in 2012 when they just launched the black car service, their first car service in San Francisco. It's like, wow, this is really the mecca. Things are happening here. How do you get to the other side of the table to partner with founders, to invest in founders and work with founders, not in just a transaction way, but in a highly supportive and investing way, like what a venture capitalist would do? And so I finally bugged John enough times and asked him for the job enough times to where he finally relented and hired me, which brought me up to Seattle in the summer of 2013. And if you asked him, he would probably agree that I had a few question marks about moving to Seattle in 2013 because it still wasn't as obvious as it is today that this city was going to be one of the most important technology hubs in the entire world. It was quickly transforming from what is an interesting regional city into the US now into one of the most important global technology hubs in the world. But it wasn't obvious to me at that time. But the reality is in venture is you want to be around really smart people. There's no clear path in terms of resume that will indicate whether or not you're going to be a good venture capitalist or not. You have to have good EQ, decent IQ. I don't know why I do this job, but you have to hustle. And so I really wanted to be around somebody that had a track record, had a reputation, someone I could just quite frankly learn from. And so that brought me up to Seattle in 2013 as an associate to learn from John and ideally find really good companies. And that's how I made it into this wonderful world of venture capital.
Awesome. Well, I mean, definitely sounds like an interesting path. And having a person sort of in that mentor role like John, I mean, is invaluable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously getting your, head handed to you at KPMG and Moreland Partners was probably a good lesson more than anything,
Yeah.
but also what a great way to sort of continue on that path. So when you moved back to Seattle from San Francisco, Um, you know, I think I'd love to hear more about how, and what you learned from John at that juncture, being in the same office, et cetera. But then also what motivated you to launch Fuse, and kind of where did you see specific gaps in the sort of VC landscape for that you were like aiming to kind of fill?
It's a really good question, and I think the older I've gotten, the more you appreciate and can even quantify the impact important people have had on your life, mentors, your parents, et cetera. And I think, John and my parents have probably had the biggest impact in terms of mentoring and even raising me to get into this craft of venture capital and learn a lot and learn the little things that are really important and and really hopefully thrive in this business. And so John taking an interest in me in 2010 probably accelerated my career in a big way, which is why I would have worked for free for
Mhm.
John at Ignition in 2013.
Right.
But I just really wanted to work and learn from somebody that had an incredible reputation not only as a human but as a professional. And so that was really the biggest influencing factor of moving to Seattle and just sitting in rooms and being around really smart people. It's so important in life and how it really accelerates, what might be healthy pressure, but it forces you to elevate yourself to, be in the room and contribute. And so when you're in a room with John or Nick Storiali of Ignition or the rest of the partners, it was really an acceleration moment in the career to where you have to step up. Just being around people, you got to step up. And I knew that, and that was the decision that influenced me to moving to Seattle and working for John. And in this business, and I'll get to Fuse shortly, it's really simple. How you become a partner at a venture capital firm is you either make money for the firm and you get promoted, or you don't and you go find a new job. And so much of becoming a partner is being at the right place, the right time, the right edge to the founder, the right relationship, and a big rock of luck. And we got connected to this founder named Samir Bodis in early 2016, who is the founder of a company called Icertis, which has merged as a real key leader in enterprise contract management software. This is one of the most important software companies, enterprise software companies in all of Seattle and in all of the US. And we were able to lead the Series B back in early 2016. We actually closed on Leap Day of 2016. So a little superstition in there, which maybe has impacted the luck of performance. But that company has clearly gone on to becoming one of the most important companies that Ignition had backed in their 20-year journey of investing. And that helped elevate me to partner. And John is still on that board today and helping shepherd that company. Well, these venture firms, every time you raise a new fund in today's market, you're really committing to working for about another 15 years. VC firms say it's 12, but the reality is you are working until you have exited every single one of the portfolio companies. You invest, you make your initial investments in about 3 years, but we're investing at such an early stage. By the time that they exit, the time horizon is now 12 years. It's not 7 to 8 like it used to be. These companies are staying private for longer. So it was the summer of 2019, and I get a phone call from John, and he said, "Hey, Kellen, just so you know, Carbon Robotics is the last investment that we're going to make at Fuse. I mean, at Ignition. And that means one of two things for you. You got to go get a job, and I'll be your biggest reference and help you land wherever you want to land. Or two, it's time for you to start a firm. And if you start a firm, I will join you, but it's super clear that I'm not going to be a GP. And I'll help in every way possible. You can name the title, but I'm not going to be a GP. That's got to be super clear to founders and super clear to LPs." What also made the choice super clear to me of what was next for Cameron and myself, who were the up and coming junior partners at Ignition, that it was time for us to take the leap, take the risk, and launch our own firm. And so that decision was made in the summer of 2019. I met my wife 2 weeks later than I got that phone call. So there was a lot of big life changes happening in August of 2019.
Right.
And we eventually launched the firm February 24th, 2020. And so we all probably remember what was about to come in the world. It was a really strange time to launch a firm. But we persevered through COVID. We figured out how to raise money in Zoom. We went back to the office 6 days a week, and we ended up raising 173 million for our first fund.
Wow. Amazing. All whilst the world was crumbling here shortly thereafter. Going in, that must have been an interesting experience to say the least. Kind of one question I think that our group always is sort of continually thinking about is how did being from Montana influence the way you approach sort of either building a business or building relationships with founders and investors, et cetera. I know John has a similar path, but I'd love to kind of just hear what that sort of grassroots story means to you.
Well, your word is your bond when you come from Montana. So when
Yeah.
you're making a commitment, what's the saying? A commitment made is a debt unpaid. And I've heard that a number of times from friends and family in Montana. But I think it's shaped a couple of reasons. One, you're a little bit unique if you're from Montana. Making your way into the technology scene. There's not very many venture capitalists in the Bay Area or Seattle or New York that have the Montana pedigree. Everyone finds Montana very interesting. They
Hmm.
find it very interesting. It's one of the most beautiful states I think it is the most beautiful state. And turns out the people tend to have an EQ and bedside manners that I would argue top any other state in the country as well. And so I think it creates an authentic relationship that's truly authentic, not transactional, with not only founders and investors. And I think that honestly gives, again, with a lot of bias, John or myself, a little bit of edge when we are courting a founder. There's a sense of warmth, there's a sense of support, there's a sense of true partnership that founders can totally feel when they're choosing to take Fuse capital versus one of our competitors.
Hmm.
And you never want to lose that. Never want to lose that. And I put Eric in that same bucket. He's not working at Nike anymore, but he has the exact same outlook on life and EQ.
Hmm. Cool. Well, just kind of switching gears now that we've kind of heard your career up until this point now with Fuse. I guess getting in the nuts and bolts of kind of what you do on a daily. I'm assuming kind of opening it up and understanding what that investment ecosystem looks like specifically for you. You see thousands of decks and startups every year, I'm sure. What are the kind of the first things you look for when you start evaluating, founders or pitches?
Yeah. Well, the game on the field has changed in a very big way in the last couple of years. Ever since ChatGPT was announced in December of 2022, the world has sped up a lot in terms of innovation with AI, with how fast you can get a company off the ground, with how low cost you can now get a company off the ground. Everyone on this webinar can be a software developer today and get a product out today. So the barriers to entry are much lower than they used to be. So if you rewind back before the SaaS era, you had to use all your venture dollars to buy server equipment, buy your routing, your networking gear. So right out of the gate, if you could raise money, you had an edge because you had technology infrastructure that could get you going. Then you get to the SaaS world where, okay, now I can just go buy cloud computing services that are significantly cheaper. I'm essentially renting cloud so I can now build products. So it got cheaper and a lot easier. Well, now today, everyone is now a software developer. So over the last couple of decades, you've seen the breaking down the barriers of what it takes in terms of resources and team to build and start a software company. Now, I just want to lay that out just in terms of a setup for how we think about the world.
Hmm.
So, with it being easier to start a company, there's a lot more noise in the world. A lot more noise, a lot more companies. Every time there's a category that seems like you can make money in it, that means there's 20, 30, 40, 50 individual companies going after that opportunity. And so, assuming it's more competitive, the index or the weight that we're putting on the pedigree and the urgency and the resilience and resourcefulness of the founder has gone up by an order of magnitude in the last 3 years. When we started Fuse in 2020, we were trying to invest in companies that were starting to grow really quickly, that had what we call product market fit, and our dollars would be used to scale revenue generally linearly because you put a dollar in sales and marketing or hire a couple sales rep, they're going to yield a result in terms of closed deals. And it was generally a math spreadsheet. Now, given companies can get going way faster, you don't necessarily need to hire Salesforce. What I mean by this is we're putting way more weight on the quality of the founders, how fast they can move, and how fast they can iterate because the markets are so competitive. And
Hmm.
what it's really like is like going from the high school football to the NFL and skipping college completely. That's how fast the step function of speed has changed in the last 3 years.
I like that analogy. Just
Yeah, it's
going from full LeBron style, I guess.
It is full LeBron, and there's just not that many LeBrons out there.
There's just not. So you got to go find those LeBrons.
Yeah.
Uh, so speaking of that, what are some of at least some of the things that stick out to you as some of those founders you see that you've backed,
Yeah.
that are sort of consistent things that you see that stand out?
Yeah. So let's put the return founders aside that have, their existing customer networks and talent. Let's talk about first-time founders because this is the funnest is to work with first-time founders and,
Yeah.
and help them become the legends that they will eventually be.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that we look for if we're putting all the weight on the founder. Of course, you have to have big markets. You ideally have an insight that's going to give you edge to win, an unfair insight, an unfair distribution. But it really is founders and markets, going back to the books and what John said in 2009. But unpacking that a little bit further, Spencer, a couple of things, because oftentimes these companies might not have revenue yet. You remember, they're using the venture dollars to get a product out the door, which means hiring engineers, which means they might not have revenue. And so if they don't have revenue, you have to evaluate the founder in a way more thorough way if it's a first-time founder. So a couple of things that we really look for are, one, are they attracting really talented people? Are they surrounding themselves with really talented people? It's such an art. It's such a skill. Are you hiring really good early engineers? Have you gotten advisors to develop an interest like John did with me, advisors, CEO coaches, your early customer advisory board? It all starts with, are you surrounding yourself with the very best people? Because that starts to compound over time.
Mm-hmm.
The second is, do you have an insight? What was the insight? Why are you starting this company? It's already so hard to be a founder and an entrepreneur that the why is so important, because that will oftentimes dictate how you deal with adversity, how you deal with the hurdles. I mean, they're coming. The hurdles, the adversity is coming. And so the why oftentimes becomes super, super critical. Mm-hmm. Some of the little things that we often look for is, the response times. Are we getting emails at 1 a.m., 2 a.m.? Are people responsive, or does it sit in their inbox for 7 days at a time? That's usually not a good signal in terms of organization and being on top of pressing things. And so we look for all these different attributes when we're assessing the quality of the founder. But the big thing for a first-time founder is, are you surrounding yourself with the very best in your industry? Whether it's talent on the software side, in our world in software, whether it's CEO coaches. And the one thing I want to impress upon everyone is never underestimate the power of your founder card. It's such an X factor when you're trying to get folks' attention. People will most usually always take the meeting with a founder of something. And so never underestimate the power of the founder card.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I think, conversely, when you think about some of those attributes you're looking for, are there massive red flags also? I know you spoke a little bit about, things being stagnant, say in your inbox or something like that. But what are other items that you're like, ooh, run,
Yeah. What we're trying to understand is, do we sense the founder is trying to make a quick buck?
Yeah.
Sell the company right away. Because when we invest with the founder, our goal is to be with them until they, bang the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange bell. Like, that is our goal. And so when we get the sense that they're going to cut bait early, that's just generally not something that we want to spend a ton of time on. The hiring too junior because you're trying to consolidate power. This is what oftentimes we're really trying to evaluate, especially with younger founders, is where you don't necessarily want to hire the best people around you that might be better at you than sales, that might be better at you than customer success, that might be better at you than product. And so oftentimes when we're looking at maybe a younger and slightly less proven but highly capable founder, we will introduce talent just to see how they react and prioritize if the person is truly exceptional. And so we're trying to see, what is the bar for talent? Do we know what exceptional looks like in people? Because this is a people game.
Yeah. Interesting. Well,
Most of our frameworks, Spencer, have come from mistakes we've made, by the way, over the years, over the decades.
Well, that's how you learn the best, right?
Yeah.
You gotta fall on your face at least a
Yeah.
couple of times. Curious too, like, I know, the term serial entrepreneur is something people have thrown around forever. Are you seeing sort of trends like that amongst people that you're like, all right, that didn't work, so I'm moving on to the next best thing? And I'm sure there's pockets of people like in Seattle and the Bay and et cetera. But is that still a trend that you would see amongst any founders that you're in contact with?
Yeah, so serial founders, a lot of our companies that we've backed have serial founders.
Yeah,
And just because you did something really successfully in 2010 does not mean it's going to work in 2025, though.
yeah,
And so the willingness to iterate and evolve still needs to be, yes, you have the urgency, you have the talent, you have ideally the customer networks, you have an unfair insight that might be a lot better. But then it comes down to, are you willing to evolve and iterate? Because I'm telling you, the playbook that, worked in 2010 probably most likely will not work in 2025. And so
okay,
that's the key
yeah,
to always improve and always evolve. These things are so fast changing. Even
yeah,
return founders get it wrong.
yeah. Interesting. I guess kind of bringing it back around, when you think about this kind of overarching saturated market, et cetera, when you look at early stage founders, especially those, building and innovating in places like Bozeman and Missoula and places around the state here,
Yeah.
you know, what's a good tactic do you, or at least that you think about to kind of cut through the noise and get a meeting with someone like you? Like how would I approach you? I mean, I know you had your aha moment when you reached out to Eric and John, but what are some insight? Could you give us a little insight on that?
Yeah, one, my door is always open, especially for somebody from Montana.
Nice.
Huge. I personally go back to Montana 4 or 5 times a year, generally Great Falls, but got married in Bozeman, went to school in Missoula. My wife's favorite town in the world is Whitefish.
Okay.
So there's
Covered.
a lot of coverage that we have back in the state of Montana. Um, the best way, so my door is always open, but one of the things that I have found when I reached out to John, I exaggerated a little bit by saying I pinged him directly. The work that had been done as my mom and myself figured out that his sister used to live in Great Falls and happened to be one of my mom's really good friends. And so I called Peggy Manning. Her husband is Jack Manning. They're big Gris supporters. Probably a lot of people on this call know them. And say, Peggy, I know John gets a ton of phone calls, a ton of emails. Will he be willing to spend 15 minutes just to give me some input on how to find the right path coming out of May of '09? And she called me or called him, I mean, and I bugged her to get the response. And sure enough, John said, hey, yeah, have him shoot me an email. Well, my email went to his junk folder. So I had to follow up a few times to have it actually elevated to where he saw it.
Nice.
And but it really come down to the power of the warm intro and the
Yeah.
quality of the intro matters. So putting Fuse and myself aside, being connected to Montana, generally people that are the quality of the intro to the investor or to whoever you're trying to get to really totally matters. And ideally it's a founder that they've backed. If you know or are close friends with the founder that venture firm has backed, that VC will take the meeting 9 times out of 10 because they never want to they will always do things for their founders, put it that way, right?
Yeah.
The next best way is if one of the VC firm's investors email the VC. They will always take a meeting on behalf of the people that pay them. That's just how human nature works.
Right.
And then if you don't have one of those paths, it's trying to figure out, do you have a close connection? And the beautiful thing about LinkedIn, yeah, it's brute force hard work, but you can ask a bunch of questions to try to figure out the best path in to whoever you're trying to get to. We have to do the same work when we're meeting LPs. We're trying to meet investors to invest in our own funds. What we found is the other VCs that these LPs are invested in, limited partners, fund investors, those have always been our best path to get the LP's attention. Because ideally, it's from a GP that has made them money and we get the advocacy, then they'll care. And
Right.
so it's just really a lot of rolling up the sleeves, the Montana work ethic that everyone on this call has that will get you there.
Yeah. Well, you said it earlier. Hustle was, one of your greatest allies. I
Huh.
feel like, it's probably was early on in your career, but continues to be part of your success strategy. One of the things, yeah, I'd love to know more about is, beyond the deck and, the pitch book or whatever,
Yeah.
what are other signals of kind of grit, vision, execution that really capture your attention?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when it comes to a founder, one that the deck is always helpful, but these decks are just a summary of the founder's vision.
Yeah.
And what we absolutely want to see is unwavering conviction an insight, signal, whatever it was that has developed and manifested into unwavering conviction. And
Nice.
so here's an example. We're investors in a company called Carbon Robotics. And the founder sold his first company for a couple $1 billion. It's called Isilon Systems, sold to EMC. He then worked on Uber's deep learning team, where he was trying to get self-driving cars in the streets. Well, the problem with self-driving cars, which we still see issues today, this was years and years ago, was there's people in the streets, there's strollers in the streets, and it's really hard for software to still maneuver when there's so many variables in the streets. Where there are not strollers is in the fields and agriculture. And so the insight that he had was the self-driving technology is really good, but it's not good enough for the street. It is good enough to where you can now bring autonomy to the farm, where they have now put dozens of these things called laser weeders in the hands of farmers that use software to identify weeds and lasers, precision lasers to shoot the weeds to eradicate weeds. So you don't have to use cancer-causing herbicides or rely on the manual labor of manually picking. And so it was an insight that came from technology readiness, but not ready for cars in the streets yet, but totally applicable to solving the food supply chain for a healthier US community.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So as we're kind of wrapping things up, and it looks like we've got a handful of questions, but if people have more questions, obviously, put it in the chat, or we can, answer them in real time. But if you could give one piece of advice to any Montana entrepreneur looking to raise venture funding, what would that be?
The one piece of advice is no one can take the founder card away from you. Again, I'm going to reorient towards this thing.
Sure.
Being a founder is one of the most noble things anyone in the entire country can do. The very first LP call that we had, we were so green that our pitch sucked. It needed a lot of improvement. It was a steep learning curve. And the guy passed in like 10 minutes. But he says at the very end, it's a multi-billionaire in real estate in New York. And he says, this country was built on backs of people like you that are starting things. And that's true about this country. That is totally true about this company, that it is built on the backs of founders. And so never underestimate the importance of the founder card and how just brute force work ethic and doing things tactically right, how far it can get you in life and in your vocation. Just cannot overstate that enough.
Okay. Great. Cool. Well, much appreciated. This is great. And needless to say, it's just a pleasure hearing your story. I think that just, again, resonates with our group, and, obviously your tie to the state, and your upbringing, et cetera. But, again, hustle was one of the things that stuck out to me. And I think at the end of the day, that's something we all are wanting more of. Comes down to time too. But do we want to jump into questions, Jenny? I think I see at least a couple here. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Jordan had one in the chat, so maybe let's start there, and then we can just go to the watch parties and see if we've got anybody from the watch parties who has a question.
Jordan, did you his concerning best talent? A founder surrounds themselves with what are the metrics that quantify the best talent? Mag 7 previous education institutions attended. Thank you for your time. That's the question. This is from Jordan Finfrock. He just put that in the chat. So,
I wish I could say it was Mag 7. I certainly don't think it's institutional of where you went to school.
Yeah.
I think, I really think it comes down to capability, competency, and character. Because the school, and again, biased that there's no career path that is linear that gets you into venture. There's no career path that makes you an exceptional founder. I think a couple of things that if I was going to stack rank it is, do you have an unwavering passion and conviction to go solve the problem? Because again, it's going to be so hard. There's going to be days where, your top employee leave you. There's going to be a day where one of your biggest customers has to churn. And what do you have to do to go save the account? You always deal with the bad news and you transfer all the good news, and the team takes credit for the good news. And so it's such a lonely, hard job being a founder, that the unwavering passion and conviction to persevere through the headwinds is the number one thing. Um, and that comes down to yourself as a founder, but also the talent, because they're going to need to be with you through thick and thin. It's easy to go take the job for the salary. It's way harder to take the big salary cut and have the promise of future equity to join a startup. And so, what is that magic of the unwavering conviction that you're surrounding yourself with in the form of your team? Mag 7's great. Oftentimes it doesn't lead to the right people. A lot of times there's people hanging out, attending meetings and getting paid a lot of money. We see this all the time where a reorg happens in one of the big companies in the US. They don't like their new job. They come say, hey, do you have any portfolio companies that are doing really well that could look for my type of background? They get to the finish line, they see the salary, and they say, never mind. And it's a total waste of everybody's time. And we see this every single quarter that there's a reorg. So oftentimes the Mag 7 will not be your best funnel of talent. It is finding the right people at the right stage that are willing to roll up your sleeves, be there in the trenches, can solve hard problems, will take input really, really well, will help scale. But it's a lot more art as at the earliest stage than it is necessarily science.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think we have a question from our watch party in Bozeman.
Yeah. Right. Hey, Kellen. I'm Evan Juris. I grew up in Great Falls too. I was going to ask if you're a bison or a rustler.
Is your brother named Mark?
Yes.
Okay, I remember your family. Yes. And I think your mom taught law school at University of Montana, right?
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I went to high school, I grew up with Mark.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, I know he was a bit of wild back then, so hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's not a bad.
No, that's a great thing. Great family. Great family.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, that's great. That's great. I was wondering if Kellen Carter sounded familiar. Well, so my question for you is, so you talked a lot about what you look for in a founder when you're looking to invest in a company. How about more on like the financial side of things? What are you looking at on the financial side of a company to make that decision to invest?
So it's a really good question. And it really comes down to the type of investor that you're courting. And so the earlier you go in a company's life cycle, talk pre-seed, seed, et cetera, where it just might be two people in a team and an idea, like literally the insight and the conviction to go solve this problem. It's all about the story, the vision, the team. It's all about the sizzle. And I cannot, overstate how important the vision and the sizzle is, because you are backing no meat on the bone. Over time, it starts to be a different type of investor than Fuse, although we do invest a little bit at this stage, but it comes down to how well is this working? And in our world, where we're investing in pure technology companies, generally software, it's how fast is it growing? It's how much is it burning? And generally, if the product is working, most of the dollars start to go into sales and marketing. So you want to understand, if I put $1 in sales and marketing, if I invest $1 in sales and marketing in the team and in the ads and the demand gen, what is the payback? How long does it take to pay back that investment? Just like you would look at a DCF in finance. And so you want to start seeing, is the LTV of that money $5 for every $1 invested? Is it growing over 200% a year, which signals that you do have product market fit? And are you not burning a lot of money? And it comes down to these frameworks that are fairly well understood once you do have product market fit and are starting to scale. But generally, it's our job, the stage that we invest in, Evan, is where these companies are generally pre-product market fit. And it's our job to help them and guide them to getting to where they're scaling with best-in-class fundamentals, or the terms that we use are called unit economics. If you switch over to like private equity or a different type of asset class than technology, it's going to be a completely different framework for them. And so this is really important to know, just as this is a really good point, is who you are as a company, what is the opportunity, and then talking to investors that are the right fit. Because if you're spending an hour talking to the wrong investor, that's an hour you don't get back. And I'll leave you with a bit of a funny story. Gosh, I was 28 years old. My job was to source really good deals for Ignition, and mainly John. It's the thing he told me, day one orientation. I had tracked down this founder named Manny Medina. He founded this company called outreach, which he grew to a $4.5 billion valuation, nearly 300 million of ARR. And I somehow convinced this total stud to do a meeting with me. Well, I get to the meeting, buy him a coffee, and I said, hey, just to be clear, I can't tell if this is competitive, but we're investors in this company called Tellwise, and it's all in the sales enablement software. But it's all murky. I cannot tell if this is competitive. And he goes, "Cool, you can have an hour of your time back." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "I don't need another friend. I need an hour of my time back. It is competitive. Good luck with the company. We hope to beat them badly." and and I
Yeah,
came away from this meeting. A lot of people would be like, "Oh, that guy's a total jerk." I was like, "No, that's a founder that understands the value of his time, and wasting it with me, who is going to be conflicted out of this investment, is not the best use of the most valuable resource that a founder has, which is their time." And so I only tell that story to you, Evan, in that really qualifying who would be the right fit as an investor, developing the relationship. And so you have clarity into what are the right fundamentals for that investor asset class to where you can aspire towards to choose your partner on your cap table as an investor.
great. Okay, yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. It sounds like, so you're saying you guys do more, you with the investing you do, you are looking more of the founder and the idea more so than the financials at the stage you're looking at.
Generally, yes. And oftentimes there is a little bit of revenue, but it might only be a couple of customers and generally
Mhm.
sub 2 or 3 million of revenue. And so that's not at a stage where you would say, okay, this thing is a slam dunk home run. There's signal, there's early customers that are willing to pay for it, but there's still a lot to figure out. A lot of times they'll go land one logo, call it an insurance company. They take forever to sell to. You get your first logo. What's the saying? One's a dot, two's a line, three's a trend. Hey, that's really good that you have the signal, but now how do we start to scale that, go add your next 4 or 5 customers? We will invest at that stage, absolutely. And that might mean $1 million of revenue from that one customer, but how do you start to scale that and make it a repeatable business?
Okay, very cool. Yeah, that all makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got another one from Jordan here. You think VCs plays risk management interjects more in pre-seed versus Series A? Should founders today wait to engage VC until they have revenue?
It totally depends on the type of firm. So there's a lot of pre-seed firms that are, and we'll do this. We will go all the way as low as or early as pre-seed, but there are firms that specialize in day one investing before there's any revenue at all. There's a whole asset class of prolific angels and pre-seed firms that now has emerged as a really institutionalized asset class that will invest at that stage. And it's all about getting to these VCs at the right time with the right pitch, because you really have 2 minutes in the meeting to wow them, to grab their attention, and ideally dive in deeper and turn you selling them to them selling you on why you should take their money. And so it's a whole institutionalized asset class now. It's very, very common for founders to raise money pre-revenue. But again, it just goes back to the story being that much crisper, that much tighter, and creating this psychological reaction of the investor that this is the person and this is all but certain that they're going to make it a big hit. And when you feel it as an investor, you feel it. You really feel it. You go from asking questions to sort of selling why you as a investor and partner would be really good for them. And I've been in dozens of those meetings before where you go from buying to selling really quickly.
Another one from Derek Tengap. Do you have a subjective definition for founder vision?
Founder vision, that's a really good question. The way that I would frame this is, what does the world look like in 10 years, and why are you and what you're building going to play a monumental impact in that and reshaping the future? What about your insight, your view of how the world will evolve, and your ability to get there? And you sort of reverse engineer the path to sort of putting satellites in the sky and putting internet all over the world. Putting Teslas on the road, whether or not you're NVIDIA having GPUs go from animation to now solving all of AI's problems. They're just AI factories, these data centers with NVIDIA GPUs. What is the future, and why are you and your strategy going to reshape it?
I've got another question here from Les Craig. With limited IPOs and increasingly tough M&A environment and extended exit timelines for most growth stage companies, how are you planning for liquidity and DPI for your LPs? And
Great question.
Second part of that is just how are you balancing that strategy with founder expectations?
So we could have a full day summit on this topic, by the way. How you balance liquidity to your LPs, because we raise a fund every 3 years. And then every 3 years, we start deploying that fund, and that means we got to raise another fund. And these things take a long time to gestate to where you're actually going to exit these businesses for meaningful amounts and return money for your LPs. Like I mentioned earlier, the asset class, the timeline, they say it's 8 years of desert, 2 years of rain in venture. That's how long it takes for these companies to mature enough to where you're selling for meaningful chunks back to your investors. So that means you're raising your next fund having not sent them any money back. And so similarly with an investment fund, we are selling the story, the vision, the edge to win the best founders that will deliver outperformance. And part of it goes to fund one, all about the story. Fund two, it's all about the story. And did you do what you say you're going to do in fund one? Fund three, are you continuing to stay in your lane of your experience and pedigree? Did you do what you say you're going to do? And is it starting to work? Have you had a couple exits? Have you had markups? Has the team stayed together? Have you had to pivot or 180 significantly? Are you attracting right people to the Fuse team? Keeping John involved is really key. Adding the venture partners that we've added, super key. So it starts just like in the company's raising money journey. It starts to shift from pure sizzle to now, is this working or not? And on the liquidity side of things, gosh, I'm optimistic. You have to be an optimist if you're a venture capitalist. You can't be a pessimist and go back money losing companies that have a very low percentage of becoming an iconic public company. You have to be an optimist in this game. There was an example of a company, I won't name it, that was going to get acquired for the many billions of dollars last year. And the logical buyer said, we want to do this, not right now. And if you unpack that, okay, I like it. I like the team. I like the product. If this is a really logical acquisition, why would I not want to buy it right now? What does that mean? Well, it means that I don't want to spend a bunch of legal banker fees on a deal that will likely get squashed by Lena Khan and the FTC, because it's hundreds of millions of dollars of breakup fees. So now that is not a barrier to M&A, you're starting to see the thawing of the M&A markets and the willingness for buyers to engage. The second thing, and this hasn't played out, but this is where I'm hopeful, is the cost of capital should ideally go down. Everyone's reading and taking a lot of, trying to read between the tea leaves on what Jerome Powell is thinking, but finally there has been sub-signaling that there is a path to lowering the cost of capital in the form of interest rates. Now that means that buying companies becomes a lot cheaper because the cost of capital is cheaper. So those two things ideally are starting to play out in a positive way for venture. The final thing I'll say on this, like I mentioned, these fund lives, every time we raise a fund, it's a 10 to 12 year fund life. We need to get liquidity. We need to exit these companies when we're reaching the end of our fund life. And that oftentimes means selling in the secondary or convincing the founders or working with the founders to find the right home for companies. So there's a lot of companies that are now at the very end of their investors' fund lives that now need to find liquidity. So I'm hoping all these confluence of events will lead to more M&A. IPOs, I think the IPO window is there. It just comes down to our founders willing to take the down round from their peak bubble valuation in 2021. That is really the gap, is what is the ego gap there.
Great.
Good answer, I know.
No, that was perfect. But like you said, you could probably spend half or more than half a day on this subject.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
One last question we've got from Genevieve, who is currently in Whitefish. Hello, and one of our Seattle ambassadors. But she's curious about, how does one find a CEO coach? Is it purely networking, or are there resources you'd recommend?
So the first thing I usually look at is, who would I want to grab a coffee or dinner or drink with that I can really trust to share my deepest and hardest challenges. Because being a CEO, like I said, it's hard, it's noble, it's lonely. So who are the people that you would want to be able to open up to, trust that they're going to have your best interests at heart and help you navigate the immense uncertainty and ambiguity of being a founder and building a company. I would argue that John has always been my CEO coach as an investor. You know, I'm not a CEO, I'm a partner in my firm, but he has always been that guiding light for helping me not only navigate my professional world, but also I've had scope creep with John into my personal world of where I might have a question or need some advice on the personal front, and he's been immensely valuable there. He married me and my wife even. Um, and so I think it's one, who do you trust because you are going to work through your hardest challenges? Second is ideally someone that you can get in person with because it makes the relationship that much more constructive. It doesn't necessarily need to be, in my view, somebody that built the company in your category. It doesn't necessarily, that can be helpful, but that doesn't necessarily indicate that they're going to, they say, here's the way I did it, do it my way. That might not be helpful. So it's really about who do you trust, who has had success, who is a couple years in front of you relative to their stage and their journey as ideally a founder and CEO that can help you avoid the same mistakes that they likely made at your stage. That's how I think about it that simply. Who do you trust and who can help you make fewer mistakes?
Nice. Well, good. I think that's all we have, at least from the peanut gallery at the watch parties, etc. But I honestly can't thank you enough on behalf of Scaling Montana and the Montana ambassadors. We were just so lucky to at least rope you in and kind of hear more of your stories. And needless to say, it's been awesome. So much appreciated.
Oh, anytime. Always happy to do it for you, Spencer. Really appreciate everyone's questions. Those were really good.
And
happy to help anytime to anyone that reaches out.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, we'll give a little bit of people's times back because we know how valuable that is. But needless to say, we'd love to have you back, and I will ping you the next time I'm in Seattle, and we can go, cruise around Bellevue and do whatever. So
sounds great. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Kellan. Much appreciated again. Thanks for your time today. Super insightful, and we really appreciate it.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kellan.
Thank you, Kellan. One thing for those of you still on the line, we are going to continue this amazing joint feature with the Montana ambassadors next month. So we'll be back here on October 1st with Joe Whittinghill. Joe, another University of Montana alum. He is a recently retired vice president at Microsoft and was the chief people officer for Microsoft for a long time. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about people, culture at big tech. So stay tuned and join us next October. Thanks so much.